Yes,
And
yes,
also,
definitely.
how do I share the screen now? I will want to start sharing the screen so it's clear to you.
I will make you presenter, then you can.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, give me 1 minute within one.
Okay.
So, very good morning to all of you. Vishalji, thank you very much for accepting this webinar series from Office of Doctoral Studies. And it is really, I'm sure that is going to be interesting because the concept, the theories, the process you are going to discuss about, it is indeed very important and required for the industry specific in industry. What exactly happened now in these days, the problem which we are facing, that what sort of skill set is being required here in the industry, what makes my students employable. No, today's marketing is changing manifold dimensions. The marketing which was for earlier and today's marketing, it has lot of different values and different aspects as involved. We have professors here in the webinar, those who are teaching these new marketing tools or new processes. But I think now this is the high time to understand and realize that what exactly needs to be skilled, in what way we are supposed to need to be skilled our student so that we can make them employable. What is the nerve system of marketing now in these? So we welcome you. I'm really very happy that you accepted our offer and to discuss and to talk about, because if you, this is what we are teaching as a professor, but you are a practitioner, you have worked those things lively in the market. For audience, I would like to tell you, Vishalji, he has masters in real estate from University of Glasgow certificates. He has earned from a BA certificate in arts. He has earned from Osmania University, and then he has a diploma, and then he has other degrees. He has a very vast working experience in all big four. So he worked with KPMG and other big four companies. And since last few years, he is in UAE, Dubai, and is working as a director in Glasgow Group of Consulting, which was founded in 2010 and which is a leading full service business research and advisory services firm, whose core expertise in the area of the marketing intelligence and market entry and the trade development. It's a very wide and very innovative way to work in this company. The way Vishalji has done and extended his support to the company, it is widely acceptable, and you can see the presence of the company. There are a lot of things which Vishalji has contributed in terms of academia as well as industry. And when I met Vishalji, I requested that why don't you share your views, your thought process, your learning, and translate it for my students. So what I think that I'm not going to discuss a lot about, because this is the topic which is near about, this is a touch to our heart. I'll request Vishalji, I'll make you Vishalji as a presenter. I'll request you to take over the session to start discussing about. Meanwhile, our students will ask questions. So what format we are following generally, that at the end of the presentation, so once you will end the presentation, after that we'll have a Q&A session. If you find that someone would like to write, answering, asking question in the midway, we'll keep those questions, and as soon as you complete the session, we'll start discussing those questions. Is it comfortable? Is it fine with
Absolutely.
you?
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
good. That's good. So I'm going to make you presenter with Vishalji, so that you can share your screen and you can talk about the concept which you thought. So you're going to have a presentation here, and
Yes.
then this
Yes.
presentation is followed by a Q&A.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I made you presenter along with me, Vichalji. Now you can share your screen.
Okay. Okay. Are you able to see my
Yes,
screen? Am I audible?
yes, you are audible and we can see your screen.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Okay.
Just
So,
do it in presentation mode.
okay, I'll put it on presentation mode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm audible and clear.
Yes, absolutely, Vichalji.
Okay. So I'll kick off. And how much time do we have for this, for the
So
initial 30
yeah, you
minutes?
you, you have around 45 to
Okay.
50 minutes, and then Q&A session.
Okay. Perfect. So thank you so much, everyone. OP Jindal Global University Professor Pandey, of course, thanks for the lovely invite. I have, education and, masters and, continuous learning. I believe I'm a continuous learner. We all learn from each other. and I always love and take pride in sharing my, experience, learnings, etc. So what we're going to do is, just to share the format of today's talk, is I'm not going to touch into the technical part of, marketing research that I'm sure you study, you will read, you enhance your skills. But I'm going to just dissect more into how the industry is structured. We're going to talk of two case studies in which I will share how do we apply marketing research leading up to a feasibility and a business plan. So we're going to study two different, very diverse. So one, I've got a consumer research piece, and the other one is a B2B research. So we will start with the definition, how the industry interprets, and you as young graduates or people who have further interest into the industry, we're going to then dissect as to where potentially lies your aspirations. And see, end of the day, a lot of decisions in our life, whether it's personal decision, you base it on a number of factors. So marketing research starts from our day-to-day life. So let me just move on. So my name is Vishal. As a professor, I hold a master's in real estate. So I've been into the consulting field now for over 15 years. I used to be last with Deloitte and Touche offices in Dubai. So consulting has been a very, very close to my heart. Just to tell you a typical consulting journey, you could start early on in your career at 20, 21, start a good consulting career. One pathway is you work as a consultant for 3 to 4 years, then you move on to the industry. So let's say you happen to work a lot on the automotive projects. You say, well, I like automotive. So you move on to a Maruti, to a Hyundai, into product development, research, etc. So that's one typical path you would. And then we're going to talk about this in detail. So for me, consulting happened later on in the life, right? So it's pretty funny. I worked in hospitality industry. My first life was all in hotels, hospitality. So my first degree, is hotel management. I studied in the Pusa run government institutes, IHM Hyderabad. I passed out. I worked for the so you'll find my profile pretty funny and interesting at the same time, because I started out in hospitality. I think that helped me to shape my, thought process. You become more customer centric, you become more sales oriented, you're very focused. And then, of course, like all of us, we go through transitions in our life. So after almost putting 6, 7 years in the hospitality industry, both in across functions, I moved on to the research business, and from research, I subsequently moved into the consulting business. So I'll also tell you to break down the different definitions of what is traditional research. Now, traditional research is moving into what is called as data science, which is the good professor here specializes in. That's really the long-term future. And then we will differentiate what is management consulting, what is strategy consulting, what is innovation management. So we're going to briefly touch upon that, right? So let me quickly get into, let's start with the definition. I will take all the questions at the end. So please feel free to write down, jot down. I will be available later on as well so happy to be of any help and support. So, why do we do research? As I said, in our, whether, we are running our personal lives, whether, I'm passing out of grade 12, I want to take a decision, what course suits me, right? Where is my interest area? Where is the market going? So I think if I have to take it early on, we all in our lives, at our personal capacities, whether we are a child, we take decisions, right? We take, as a family, let's say you're a family of 4 siblings and parents, and you say, well, tonight or this weekend, we're going to go for a movie, right? So as a family, you take a decision. Now, in that decision process, there are factors, there are people who influence that decision make, factor. So somebody, a father may think, well, what is the logistics? How far is the cinema? A child will say, well, Papa, I want, I like this cinema. This is a good movie going on. I want to hear. So I think the message here is that research, or, the early thinking in our thought process has already started. We are constantly taking decisions, whether at work, whether in whether choosing a course, whether choosing a company. So just this basically kinds of sets the tone. Now, definition, traditionally market research is, if you have to just take a very traditional definition, it is a very systematic design, collection, analysis, reporting of data, and then to arrive at a business decision. Now, an interesting fact I want to share here is, in companies, in large organizations, you talk of the P&Gs, the Unilevers of the world. It's strange and funny that the brand managers take, so they do research. Now, strangely, there is data which says that a brand manager need not necessarily base his decision on what he finds in the collected data. So even from a brand manager perspective, almost 80 to 95% of the decision to, the brand is going to go into this direction is again out of gut feel. That's strangely true. A lot of times we use research, marketing research, data as a, precursor or a basis to support what we are saying, right? At times, and I have, in my consulting career of 15 years, I have come across clients wherein clients have, they've told me that our board, the company board, has already taken a decision. I was working for a mall operator in Saudi Arabia, and we have already taken, they wanted to remove something from the mall. Now the board has already taken a decision, and post that decision, you bring in a market research company to say, well, can you substantiate our decision that we have taken a right decision? So we do research and we find out, contrary to what the board thinks, that we went back and said, no, you need to keep this. You don't need to remove this because there is a value this proposition brings to the overall mall's offering. And unfortunately, long story short, we had to change our recommendations because at the end, the client is paying your bills, right? So these are funny incidents I'll keep on sharing. So quickly moving ahead, I've got almost a lot of slides in this deck. We need not necessarily go through all of them. So definition, we understand, we are all in academia. So what are the different types of, now let me here bring in a perspective because, all of you will come with your own interest areas. They will be like, personally me, I like more of B2B research. And when I say B2B research, it's called business to business research. Now, in my view, when you talk of consumer research is, on a larger scheme of things, is one of the elements of B2B research, right? So in B2B research, you're talking of, the competitor, you're talking of demand, you're talking of supply, you're talking of the external environment, the macroeconomic factors. And then in a typical B2B research process, we tend to market size, right? So if there's a new client coming into the market, you need to know as a brand, product, or service, how big is my market? Who is my competition? What is the price they are selling at? Will my price hold good, right? Where do I want to position my product? Now, in this slide, we basically outlined a few elements which you will come across, and as you move on with your career, whether you start your career in marketing, whether you start your your career in brand development. Now, these are words or phrases which you will hear a lot. So I'm just sharing them as a perspective. And then now, just to tell you, because see, eventually the objective of this talk is what is the role of marketing research, and then how does that fit into your career aspirations, or should you want to become. So let me just talk a bit on that basically. So what happens is, when you may join an organization which we call as the agency side. So let's say a Nielsen, Ipsos, TNS, YouGov. Now these are large global consumer research agencies. They primarily do consumer research, right? Then you have agencies which will only do B2B research. So in India, I can think of Technova Global. There's a company out of UK called B2B International. They primarily do B2B research, and I will share some examples when we get into the case study level, how that works, how that pans out. Then from B2B research, we move into the typical consulting environment, which I came from, is you will have a big four. So big four is the Deloitte, KPMG, EY, and PwC. These are the big four firms, and then you have smaller. Now these firms have four to five verticals, right? So they've got tax, they have got audit, audit and assurance. They've got management consultancy. They have got corporate finance, which is more of
Hello.
fundraising. And yes, hi, can you hear me?
Okay.
So these are how the typical big fours are structured, and then you have management consultancy
I'm attending
firms
that call right
or
now. After that, I'll
or
come to BKC.
or strategy firms like McKinsey, Booz, BCG. These are all strategy firms,
Yeah,
right?
ठीक है.
So all these firms which I just spoke
हाँ,
about, somewhere the basis of
ये होते होते 1
of
बजेगा
your
I think.
of your advice and research is
कितना?
a lot of it is marketing research.
ठीक है.
Now
ठीक.
I'm going to share with you a typical, so you may land up working in a firm which is doing pure consumer research. You may land up working in a firm which is more into B2B or the management consulting. So let's say I, for example, worked on Deloitte and Touche. So let me share one typical process of, you start with research, you get into the feasibility. Now, feasibility is typically you're evaluating a business from a financial perspective, and then that feasibility you could come and lead into a business plan. So typically, what is it? What are the elements we look at or consider when we are undertaking a typical feasibility or a business plan process? So let's move and get into that. So typically, any market study you do, there are macroeconomic factors, which so currently, as we understand, our the whole world is going through a pandemic. We are at COVID-19. Our lives have changed. Obviously, businesses are impacted, etc. So typically, when you're doing any market study assessment, typically now in the last over the 2-3 months, I have seen anything that we are preparing for the client, right? It has a huge impact on how we projecting our numbers, right? So if I was doing a growth chart, to project the sales are impacted, right? Your cost structures are impacted, right? Your manpower is impacted. You have to let go a lot of people. So typically, the message of this slide is that any market study that you undertake, there is an element of external forces. How attractive is a country? How attractive? If I was to set up a biotechnology park in India, right? So what are the key result KPIs or indicators which I can justify and go back to a client with conviction and say, well, this is where the market is. This is how much is the demand, right? So we're talking of macroeconomics. So these are typically what we call as macroeconomic factors. So you basically have to assess, what are the, for the product or service we're talking of, what are the levels of income, what is the current unemployment rate, if it is a feasibility which requires a lot of people. So these are certain, politically stability indexes which I have mentioned we may cover, and then on the right side is how big is the market, what is the country risk, is the product for the which we want to enter or research on, is that a saturated product? Then a very important part, as you start a business, or as an entrepreneur, or as a brand custodian or a business, I want to understand who is my competition. Now, why is competition important? Competition is important because it gives you an immediate assessment as a layman, okay, that I am launching a product and I am introducing a new service or brand to the market, right? So who am I competing against? What is the price that particular product is being sold at? If there is an XY company, what kind of market share those companies have? What kind of technology have they used? What is their organizational structure? Now, all these things help me to derive a story, right? So typically in our any market study, we go very deep dive to understand the competition, because competition, while you would have heard or read of things like blue ocean strategy, wherein you're creating something completely new. Competition is still relevant, I feel, because a lot of times we are introducing products or services which are already in the market. So we are either bringing a better version, or we are creating a better value offering, or we are taking a higher volume route, right? Depending on what my vision for the product is. And then you eventually have to find out, you need to do a demand and supply analysis. So simple terms, supply is, all the products being produced, the goods, the competition. This is all the supply side in a very layman's language. And in a very layman's language, demand is anybody who is a buyer, right, to these products and services becomes the demand side, right? So in any business that you start, any product that you launch, it is very, very, very important to be very clear, from this product perspective, how is the demand and supply equation? Is supply exceeding the demand or demand exceeds supply? Because that then leads you to a lot of answers on pricing, positioning, etc., etc. Now, typically, this is a very important slide in any client engagement that we do. If we are doing any market feasibility or a business plan, you need to understand, and I'll explain you in a very simple language here, what is my addressable market. So let's say, you have let's take an example. Let's take India as a market, right? Let's take baby's milk powder, okay, which the small infants, when the newborn babies, they have this milk type. So if I have to do the market sizing for this particular product category, right? So so the larger circle there, the blue one on the outside, is the potential market, is basically the whole total potential opportunity is the let's say the women segment who are who have babies basically, right? So that becomes the total all, and then from there you move into the total addressable market, then you get into the segmentation market, and then you become into the addressable market. Now I will start with the addressable market. Is basically, addressable market is children who are obviously newborn and who may be in the age groups of whatever 1 to 3 to 4, where this particular milk type is consumed. Now that becomes my really the addressable market, right? So I may have so many children, right, in the country, right? So many pregnant moms in the market, but that is the overall. So basically what you do is in any market study or anything which you are assessing, whether you are starting a new business, eventually the answer you need to come to in a very funneled way is, what is the addressable market size? Because eventually any business which you're going to steal, if you're starting a new business, any business that you're going to steal is from this addressable market. So that is the larger point that I want to make here. Now, these are certain typical analysis formats. There are a lot of, you would have heard of, SWOT analysis. You will, I'm sure, Porter's forces. There is, A.T. Kearney's, So strategy firms or a lot of times to analyze certain data, right? We use different formats because different formats means or different, they will help us to arrive at the analysis for the client in a more meaningful way. So I'm going to talk more on this when we get into a live case study. Then comes the question of localizing the product, right? We need to localize the product because it's extremely important. Every market is unique. Your tastes or eating preferences down south is different from the eating preferences in north. And thus, if I was a McDonald's who was opening in a religious town of Tirupati, right, or Tirupati Balaji, or so we need to ensure that out of respect and out of the right gesture, that whatever McDonald's products I sell in a religious town is all vegetarian. So this is basically what you mean as localizing your strategy. So a lot of times brands come from overseas, enter new markets, and then you completely miss out your strategy. Now, this is an example. I'm not sure if this currently in India. Tim Hortons is a it's like a Starbucks, very value brand based out of Canada. Like there are over 2.5, 3,000 Tim Hortons stores in Canada. Now, the average coffee price for a Tim Hortons coffee in Canada is in the tune of, let's say, $2.5, wherein Starbucks would be four and a half, right? So when Tim Hortons came to the market where I work, which is United Arab Emirates, right? They priced their product at par with Starbucks. Now, why did they do it? What made them think they should be doing this? So what eventually whoever the franchisee in the UAE was, he took a call that, well, I want to position Tim Hortons, which is more of a, it's in literally every street in Canada, in any Canadian city. The local custodian of the UAE market said, well, I want to make this particular brand compete with Starbucks because I believe that is where we want to. Now, there are different financial KPIs, financial reasons, market reasons why he came to the conclusion, right? Now, they are pretty much successful here and in a few markets that we work on, and I've seen them. So this is another example that you were a very value brand in Canada, but you entered a market such as UAE. You positioned your product at par with Starbucks. Now, this is part of your analysis, your strategy on how you see a new brand entering. Then I briefly already spoke to you about pricing and positioning. Pricing is very important in anything we do because pricing is literally make and break for a business. Whether you're talking of food and beverage, you're talking of retail, you get a wrong retail store in a wrong location, you have a problem. You will have to shut down in some time. So particularly if I have to talk about food and beverage, so food and beverage business, as you know, is structured into four parts. There is fine dine, there is casual dining, there is fine dining, and there is fast casual. These are the four categories. So as an operator, so if I'm an operator sitting in Gurgaon, right, running these formats, I have to be very clear. So let's say McDonald's and KFC falls under the quick service restaurants. Now these locations or point of sales have certain expectations. So there are brand guidelines that a McDonald's or a KFC can only go into a particular kind of environment, right? It has to go into a food mall, a food court within a mall, or a standalone location which has a good frontage, etc. So these are all the holistic things any brand or product has to look at in order to succeed. And pricing is a very important part. Now, this is again one of the matrix that we use, which is Porter's, and basically I can map out brands here to understand where a new brand which we are working, for example, as a client. And so I could put this in this chart and put all the competitor names to arrive at some kind of analysis. Now, these are certain analysis charts. I mean, these are things you would have already started seeing or doing it. So I would move ahead. We need to then understand what is the risk in the business, right? All businesses need to think, the pandemic coming, COVID-19, did any CEO or business owner think something as harsh as big is coming? I don't think so. Do people still have a clue what macro level impact it's going to have on the economy or at a micro level business? I don't think so. I think the more analysts you hear or speak to, I think we've still not reached the peak. And unfortunately, there are no projections. If somebody was to reach out to me as a consultant, right, and say, well, can you do some projections? It will be a mere speculation in my view. So these are things that when I'm doing a feasibility or a business plan or a market research report, we need to highlight as risk, because these are things the client will appreciate. Because it's like saying, It's like saying that should you do this, right? Yes, this is the percentage chance that you're going to succeed, provided your positioning, pricing, you place your retail store in the right location, etc., etc. But at the same time, please understand these are the risks. So risk could be, well, you may not get the right manpower, you may not get the right piece of real estate, right? Or the real estate that you may get is expensive than what we are budgeting or factoring for, right? So that is an inherent risk for my business. So these are things that we need to highlight. These are certain risk mapping tools. Now, another important thing is to know your customer, right? Uh, as I said, every consumer, India is a very diverse country. We have different eating habits. We have different, we behave differently. Our entertainment habits may be similar, but again, it changes with time, with the environment you get exposed to. A lot of times you travel abroad, you experience newer things, right? So a consumer's mind is very complex. So if I'm creating a new brand or product, if I'm launching a new business, I need to really understand how do I make my product to have a more universal appeal, right? And have a larger target audience. The last thing you want is that you have a very funneled, very narrow, addressable market for the product you are in, because then you're not gonna make enough volumes, right? Depending what kind of business you are in. So every business has a different nuance, whether you are a low volume business, low margin business, you want to do high volumes, or you are a high margin business, right? And you want to do lower volume. So this is part of your business strategy. Now this is again, uh, since I work in this market, I just want to share, one of the market studies which we had done and just to give you a context that I'm talking of two markets. So the right side chart is the Saudi Arabia, and the left side picture, which is encircled, is United Arab Emirates, where we work. Now, we were doing a study for a footwear manufacturer, a sandal manufacturer from UAE. Now that wants to enter the KSA, the Saudi Arabia market, right? Now, as a business strategy, part of our whole scope of work was to undertake research to understand, what do men wear, et cetera, et cetera. So we go to Saudi Arabia, we do our consumer research. In the first interview, first question, when I interview the gentleman, I realize there's a huge problem and and a point that I come to know is that in United Arab Emirates during the day hours, the official hours. So this is called a kandura. It's called a dish dash, which the locals wear here. The logic here is in good old times when the weather was very sandy and so this would keep the sand away because you're pretty much in a desert environment, right? Uh, so what we found in the research was the local UAE customers wear sandals, okay, for office hours, whereas the Saudi, the picture on the right is they're wearing all shoes, right? Now this is a huge finding for me. First interview, first client, first meeting, right? Now what does this mean is that if this client of ours is a sandal manufacturer, he wants to enter the Saudi market, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer that we need to advise this client that uh, when you are entering the Saudi market, don't go with the sandal range alone. Go with sandal and shoes, right? Because primarily the Saudi local is wearing shoes during his office hours, and he's wearing sandals in the evening time. So client, we gave this as an eventual recommendation as part of the overall study. I mean, this was a very small thing though, but very, very important, had we not observed this and the client not thought about it, right? So you're going to open a store with only sandals where in a market where your primary target market is wearing shoes, right? So you are getting your whole strategy wrong. So these are small things. This is just one example, uh, which as you get into your careers, and you take deep dive into brands, products, these are the kind of observations you will come on, and these are the kind of observations which will help you add value to your client, whether you are sitting on the client side, right, or you're sitting on the agency side. So I'm sitting on the agency side. If I was to work on the client side, I still need to think on these things, right? And then once we have finished the market study, you need to understand, well, does my business make money, right? When do I recover back my money? You know, businesses, as we all understand, are going concerns. A business needs to make money. A business needs to be profitable. A business can be defined to be not for profit, but it still has to make profit, right? You can be non-profit, but you still need to pay your bills, right? So in my view, any and every business needs to be profitable. Any business needs to grow year on year. If you're not growing year on year, you're fundamentally declining, right? So you need to have a whatever based on where you are and what sector you are. You need to grow. You need to manage. If you're a larger business, you will have borrowing, so you need to ensure. So the fundamental problem which is happening in a lot of economies, including India, is with production stopping, almost going to a halt, because a lot of your migrants have moved out. Basically the whole the cycle has stopped, and once the cycle stops, a micro SME which needs to generate, which is literally on a survival mode on every month. He needs to produce, he needs to get revenues every month in order to survive, in order to pay his bills, in order to service his debt, right? So we are basically, that whole cycle has got stuck, and thus unfortunately we will hear more of you will hear more of whether it's a bankruptcy or as a business, if I'm still slightly bigger, if I'm a a slightly bigger SME, I may look at restructuring my debt. I may reach out, but fundamentally, what any prime minister or economist or is now saying that, well, economy needs to move on, because yes, you have a problem, uh, but you have a bigger problem if the whole, because everybody is in some way or the other linked to that value chain, right? So if you stop producing, right, whether it's in manufacturing or you stop, so only few sectors are working currently, you are basically going to create a bigger issue. And then we have the ROI analysis, or these are different analysis we undertake as part of, these are certain samples. We'll go more in detail. And then, as I said, every business needs to scale. If you're not scaling up, you are basically declining, or you're shrinking, and eventually you're going to fade out, right? We need to understand the manpower availability, any business. So let's talk of, for example, a BPO business or a KPO, knowledge. You have now something called as knowledge process outsourcing. Now, why are these or a technology business like pure coding? Why are they based out of Chennai or Hyderabad? The fundamental reason is because you have a large pool of talent, and all these businesses are very knowledge-driven businesses, and thus you need a lot of manpower, right? So I want to be, as a business, as a technology business, I want to be located in a place where, because my fundamental need for my success is manpower, right? So manpower availability is very important, whatever business you are in. And then, of course, it's about how you retain the talent, how, all businesses face turnover issues. You need to create a culture and an environment to succeed. And then it's also important to understand in what legal way is my company structured. That's a whole different thing altogether. Whether you are a partnership, LLP, why should you be a private limited company, etc. So this part will come in a business plan which we are doing. Now, let me just, as I said, let me share one example of a typical market study. This was a recent one we did in March. This is more anybody who's an engineer will maybe relate more. But again, this is any marketeer can do it. This is not rocket science. So you all know my background, right? I know nothing about this industry. I know nothing about precast, but by the time we finished the study in around 8 weeks, I could be presenting this to the managing director or CEO of the company. This was for a very large Indian construction group, which already have a big presence in United Arab Emirates. They are into the construction field. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. They wanted to enter the precast market. So let's get into it. So this is typically how a market study, the table of content is structured. So as I already briefed you in early on, any market study typically starts with the macroeconomic, what's happening, how is the GDP growing, how are the economic activities, the contributions by sector. From there, we speak about the inflation rates, etc. What are our observations? 2 years back, just like India, you had GST, you have GST, we've got VAT, right? So how does VAT play a role, right? We had a slowdown 2 years back because suddenly you had VAT being introduced. And then you slowly get into the construction market outlook. From there, you move into the budgetary expenditure. You move into, the population, growth in population. Then we get into the precast market. Now, imagine that this report is being read by a layman who knows nothing about this sector, this industry. So we need to, any research study that we do has to, it's like a objective, right? In colleges, universities, we write dissertations, we write research-led projects. So what is the first thing we do? We need to, you figure out what the topic is, and then you say, what is it that I want to achieve? What is my objective, right? And then any of your teachers will tell you, please help this. Let's refine this to figure out what is the business problem here. In case of academia, it will be more of saying what are we trying to solve? What problem are we solving, right? Are we adding something to the literature which does not exist? Are we justifying it through an empirical technique, etc., etc.? So here we are saying concrete construction is, you basically do on-site concrete, you have ready-mix concrete, you have, so precast is one of the things, and you have the others. And then on the right side, you see, on-site concrete is done on-site mixing, ready-mix concrete, and then you say total, what is the share of this category? So precast has a particular share within the overall ready-mix concrete category. So we are only interested in this. From here, we move into understanding the industry, that this industry is structured into, so you have precast, which goes into the structural side of things. It goes into the architectural types of things. Then it goes into the miscellaneous, the culverts, when a road is built, you have these box culverts. Typically now we find even boundary walls in a lot of places is pure precast. So these are the different types of precast applications. And then we have plotted this across the value chain, how, so on the, from a very design stage till the completion stage where the product categories fit. This is more visual. I'll move quickly now. And then basically you say, okay, what are the current competitive answers now? So now we're getting into understanding the industry in a little more deep dive, right? So we get into the market. Now this is a very important slide. This slide is not something which you can do immediately. This slide you have spent a lot of time. By the time you're already, let's say, 3 weeks into the project, 4 weeks into the project, and you say, okay, well, I found out there are 8 to 9 large precast players in the market. There are 9 to 10 medium size. And then you found out their turnovers, right? You found out their names. You found out, and then these are different interviewing techniques, which I'm not covering as part of this because that is obviously, so what you're learning as various research techniques. So here we applied more of face-to-face interviewing, more on what I call as the discussion guide. So we prepare a discussion guide. The discussion guide is run on a more, the discussion guide is run more on a The discussion guide is run more on a informal interviewing technique because there are more open-ended questions. There are more. You're trying to get into the deep insight of the industry. Moving ahead. Now, then we took a few projects and we said, how are they split? How is the application split, right, across these categories? Then every project, as I said, we need to arrive at the market size. How big is the market, right? How big is the market size opportunity? So we come up with a technique, a market sizing approach. So we have elaborated this in the slide because the client may ask us this question, how did you arrive at the market size? And then, so we're saying here, based on our analysis, so I have all this data in the backside. We have done an Excel calculation, right? We're saying in 2020, the UAE precast market is USD 0.79 billion, right? So this is very important. This is a very, very important point because the client's decision to enter in this market, this is a very important factor they want to know. Well, how big is the market, right? Moving ahead, then you start basically mapping the competitors. You make visits to these places. You understand who their customers are, at what payment terms are they buying, selling. You understand, do they have an 80-20 rule? Most of their 80% of their business comes from 20% of the clients, or is it more of an unstructured market, right? How does the buying process work? Are there middlemen involved in between? How does the tendering process work? Because this is largely more of a tendering type of work. So I will move quickly here. You basically, and then you capture certain primary research insights which have come out of interviews. You basically say, okay, what is the pricing mechanism? Now, this is the slide we put together a little more extra, insights because the client was particularly interested on the miscellaneous precast side of the market. So they said, okay, we want to learn more about this. And then what are the growth drivers? What are the challenges? And then eventually you need to give recommendation to the client, right? That what are the critical success factors? What will be the unique selling proposition for you as a business? What are the approval criteria? Then this is where we have applied the Porter's forces to understand what will be my competitive strength? Where lies the threat? Do I have bargaining power? Is it a highly large part of the industry is controlled by 3-4 players, right? So these are the things, nuances which will come out here. Then you do a SWOT analysis. So SWOT analysis will have opportunities, threats, right? And then we get into eventually what are you suggesting to the client? What is my market recommendation? So this is typically how, this typically would look like a 50-60 slide kind of a project. This would take around 6 to 7 weeks of turnaround time, right? So this is one kind of project. Let me now quickly share with you a study. Now, this is a study for a client we did in Saudi Arabia. Let me just tell you the objective. This is a school which falls in a higher price point, right? And the student numbers are falling. So school has a problem that there are kids leaving the school. So the management says, okay, we want to undertake a research assignment and find out where are the reasons. And let's also study the competitors. Let's take a qualitative route. So we did around 5 focus groups with the mothers, right? Because mothers play a big role on deciding which school a child goes. And then we undertook quantitative research. So this is just for you to share how a deliverable works, how the process works. So there's a research objective here defined. So you sign this as a contract with the client that these are the areas I'm gonna study as part of this, as part of the research. Now, so this is just visually telling what was my research methodology. These are certain focus groups which we took, some visuals. And then you structured your thing as role of education, association with school. Now, these are my key deliverables, sub-deliverable. satisfaction levels aspects of school selection, then interviews with former parents. So the whole interviewing technique was divided into 3 parts. So we studied the parents of children who have left the school. Then we researched parents of children who are currently in the school. And then the third segment was parents of children who are not part of the school, but they live in a 10-kilometer vicinity of the school, because potentially they're also your target market. They go to some other school. However, they can come to your school, right? They can potentially join your school. So those were the 3 segments around which the whole. These are certain recommendations which just for you to, or action points for the school management, right? So we found there was, less emphasis on English from a delivery perspective. There were lesser emphasis given on extracurricular activities, particularly after school hours, right? There were, there are less open spaces, green open spaces, right? And then the teaching staff, it was suggested that, you need to have a better defined KPI or a KRA, which is more performance linked, right? And overall, we found that, the level of engagement the school was giving with the mothers, particularly, was an area of improvement. So those were certain elements which came out in the quantitative research. I will not spend time. Let's move quickly. These are how, then you come up with certain criterias which, and these were all typically. So in the bottom, you can see the questionnaire which addresses, and then this is the analysis. So these are the top satisfaction aspects for a school, which a parent cares for. Similarly, which are the top ranking aspects? So curriculum, courses offered, what are the extracurricular activities? Is the school paying enough emphasis on English language? Of course, the fees. How about the other sporting activities? What is the quality of the teaching staff, etc.? So these were criterias which were given. And then these are certain recommendations which we are giving to the school. Then we get on with the competitor assessment. So you start with really the benchmarking. You take the school, you're trying to understand the location, the curriculum, what is the capacity versus the current utilization, how many number of students, what is the fee range. So our school, the client school, what does it get benchmarked against? What are the facilities each offers? Then the pros and cons of the competitors. Then what are the learnings that we can derive from the competitors? That's it. So just to summarize, as we said, the ultimate objective was to give you an understanding. Now you could start in a pure research firm as an entry-level analyst, right? Which as I defined would be a traditional research firm. You could start on the client side. You could work for a Levers or a Procter and Gamble. Now, research there fall under the segment of either marketing or brand management, etc. Now, market research, which we have not covered, obviously this time is not enough, is now moving more towards data analytics, data sciences. So I think what is happening currently in the market landscape is, while traditional research will remain, a lot of has gone into data mining, data science, etc. So there are now firms which specialize into that. Now, for me personally, my interest area happens to be, because I come from a hybrid model, a research and a consulting background. Is I basically learned the first study which I shared with you, which was on precast. That is my personally my interest area, because I feel it kind of gives a holistic picture on. But then obviously there are many other areas. You could be a generalist. You can get specialized on an industry. You can work on the client side. You could work on the agency side. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, and I think it's not about. I think the larger message we need to give here is that if you do this early on in your career, it basically makes you very structured. So anybody who works on, and I say it to anybody who asks me this question is, uh, if you work in the research and consulting early on in your career, not that everyone has to, right? Everyone has a different interest area, but then it just helps you become more structured in your thought process. You take any business problem, you dissect the business problem, and then you go in a very structured way to arrive at a, either you're solving your personal problems or you're solving a client problem. So thank you. This is all from my side, and I'm happy to take on any questions.
Thank you, Pandey. Thank you very much for your insightful deliberation. Now, floor is open for Q&A session. I'll request scholars, guests to raise a question, whatever the questions they are having. And good. So, in the sense, when I ask that question, that then our scholar, doctoral fellowship student, Akash is asking. First of all, he is giving a thank you to you, Vishalji, for this insightful session. And now he's working in the area of MSME right now. So what he's asking, that it's really burdened my origin in that area. Sir, MSME in India are contributing almost 30% towards Indian GDP. Indian government is trying to focus more, focusing to increase the share to 50%. I believe market research will be the key for MSME to succeed. Since large companies have high budget compared to the MSME and market research is an expensive exercise, how can MSMEs in India do their market research in economic way, especially if they want to go international?
See, again, any and every business. Thanks for the question. I think, Akash, that's a great thought process. See, first of all, not every business can grow international, right? You need to be of a particular. For example, if you're an online business, right, and then you think that online model can be replicated into a new market, so yes, your business can go, whether then you need to raise finance, etc. But if you're a very small SME or a MMSME, what you're doing is you're trying to solve a very local problem, right? And I think the bigger point here is whether you run a kirana store, whether you anything that we do in our lives, as I said, I started out by saying we are taking decisions in every aspect of our life. So even if you think of a guy who is taking, let's say, a franchise for a mother dairy, right, a booth, right, forget any academic research. What should he logically think? He should think, where should my store be, right? Simple maths I'm giving. He needs to, you can literally, and these are things probably he's running in his numbers, that I need to be in a place, right, which has a catchment to these many number of families, right? Now, on an average, the family buys this much of milk, right? So potentially what he has to do is, when he has to do the maths, he needs to arrive at, across the day, with all my milk offerings, from a lassi to a milk to a yogurt, right? How much of sale can I achieve, right? So that is one aspect of the sale side. The other side comes, to make that business viable, I need to be able to cover up my expenses, right? So then you need to do your mathematics in saying, okay, if I was to go into a catchment area which is going to help me achieve this much of sales, what is the potential rental I'm talking of? And in your mind, you need to come up with a threshold rent. So you will say, boss, if I'm doing, and typically there are formulas, and I can tell you in retail, basically whatever is your lease value. So if my lease rent is, just I'm throwing a number, it's 25,000, right? Is my monthly rental. Your turnover, there is an equation, right? Turnover has to be a multiplier of 5, basically. Otherwise, you're not viable, right? So these are certain KPIs. If you're doing a footwear store, there'll be a particular retail generally has a KPI. Similarly, a food and beverage business will have a KPI. So I think to answer your question, whether he's able to afford, I think that's fine. But as a small entrepreneur, if he has taken up this decision, he will be smart enough, right? Because he has left potentially his job, he has certain credentials, or man, he can be something who who has nothing to lose. Sometimes, if you're overeducated, you become less risk averse, right? So he would have taken that decision that, boss, simple maths, this is my cost, this is the kind of revenues I'm able to achieve. Simple revenue minus cost is, am I being left with enough which is good for my sustenance? And typically I can tell you this, just out of, because I interact with a lot of entrepreneurs. I was told when I started out my journey many years back, it will take you literally, again, and this is no benchmark, please don't take this as a benchmark. In your year one of your business, you should be, and this was a very interesting analogy somebody gave me, in your first year of your business, you have to be 25% of your last salary earned. So you get into a business leaving some career, right, or your job, and you were getting an X salary there, so you should get 25%, 50, and basically by year 4 you need to hit. I mean, you may say, well, 4 is a lot, but this is one thought process I'm telling you. By year 4 you should be you should have achieved the earning, the salary that you were drawing, right, as a business. But from year 5 you need to take off. When I say take off, you need to fly, because then you are basically going to cover up all your loss. You took a a career risk, you took a financial risk. All those risks you took because you felt that, well, I could do something better, or I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to make a change, or I want to make a contribution. Fundamentally, if you don't see exponential growth in your revenues, in your own personal earning from year 5 onward, fundamentally there is a problem. And that's why they say, that's why there are different statistics to say that, well, in every 10 businesses that start, almost 8 shut down within 3 years of operation, right? So there is some basis of saying that. So again, I think the to answer your specific question on MSMEs, I think somewhere at the back of their mind, they are running these numbers. They should be running these numbers, because that is really the basis of taking a decision why I want to do what I want to do. You have to take a decision. So you may not call it, he may not even know the term market research, the phrase, right? But in his subconscious mind, he has these numbers, working and linking. And once he's convinced that, boss, yes, I can take the jump, he takes the jump. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishalji. One of our students, she has completed her degree, and she has also similar background of service industry. She's working as an analyst in the service industry. Ashmi, and she's asking a question with you that, sir, she would like to have your comment specifically on the quality of market research which is used in India as compared to the developed countries. A question is there any gap? If yes, how big this gap is in comparison to which context, which country?
See, I think India is not inferior, or an X country is not superior in any way, in any sphere of a life. I think it has been proved time and again. I think, whether you talk of, United States, you talk of, the half the engineers which contribute to the US economy, or the doctors, these are primarily Indians or Chinese origin. Over, I think NASA has almost has 25% of, even more of Asians, which is Indians and Chinese. So I think, I really don't think that an X country or is doing better. Now, what may be happening is there are certain certain level of interest or developments which may be happening, right? So you may find that a particular area of data science uh, an X country or an X company may have taken it forward. But I think I fundamentally I don't think that India lacks in any way. I think we have got the best of brains, and the testimony to that is our technology business. Which basically is fundamentally people. These are young, bright engineers, and what engineering does to you, basically it opens up your mind. You just have a structured thinking, right? So any engineer or a management graduate can go and work in a technology company, as long as you are so I don't see that as a constraint. It's just about bringing around your specializations. There are certain technologies or innovation, but yes, from if you look at just as an analogy, the amount of Nobel prizes, on whether it's science or whatever area, a lot of it has come out of United States. So probably uh, the answer to that is that there has been a huge amount of focus on the type of education and the way you are made to think, the infrastructure that is made available to you, right? So it's the same if you look at the Satya Nadella of Microsoft, or the Google CEO. He comes from a humble background, studied in Manipal engineering, and he made his way out of sheer hard work. But if you were to say, well, uh, would Satya Nadella had achieved the same level of success if he was in India? I'm not sure, because I think but again, I'm not comparing an India to US. Each one has its. There are different dynamics and situations, but I think certain countries do offer you those opportunities, maybe which he got because, and you happen to be working for a Microsoft or a Google, which uh, on a apple to apple basis, we don't have. India has not given such a great innovation. I wish with you guys, and I wish there is a beginning made somewhere. So I don't think we lack anything. I think it's just that the if we are given a more conducive environment, we can do the same.
Vishalji, she's continuing her question. Ashmi, she's continuing her question, and she's asking that how can these students of MBA graduate or freshers can craft themselves to establish themselves in the field of market research. What skills they are supposed to inculcate? What are the steps they are supposed to adopt in order to establish themselves in this research industry?
See, I think there are multiple things one needs to do, or so if this is an area of interest, I think like any, when I was in my earlier life in hospitality, I used to read a lot because it interested me the most that time, whatever, because I was starting out my career, and then I evolved over time. You evolve, so I think the best advice would be is to read a lot. I think yes, you may be going through a great education system, which is good, but I think supplement that with the additional learnings, whether it's there are some short courses, online courses. There is a market research society in UK, there is a market research society out of US. They have these small certifications. Do that, because see what it does is, if I'm a recruiter or if I'm a business head and I get a CV in front of me wherein what what you're seeking from a fresher is really the those keywords, right? Our dwell time, the CV is very short. When you get a CV, you literally see it for 10 to 15 minutes. Your dwell time, our brain has a very very short lived when you're checking an email, for example. So the point is that you need to ensure that you pick up those key points. So obviously your CV has to be structured right. The CV needs to somewhere give the reader the message that this person is slightly analytical inclined, right? I may be a guy who is very good in sales. My love could be sales or customer service. But here, if you're saying market research, I need to somewhere show this message that, well, I like analysis, I like numbers, I like data. This is where I see my future. So anything which you do, which could be a short course or anything, because eventually what you need to do is to open up a discussion in somebody allowing you an internship. That's the basic thing. When I was in my course, in my first year of my course, I went for a, just out of awareness, I went for a 5-day work in the hotel industry because it gave me the first hand exposure. So I think you need to create that fire, that hunger, that desire, that come what may, if this is what I like, I will do. And believe me, I say it and I repeat to myself, applies to all of us. I will use a phrase called the power of asking. It's a very, very important thing. If you feel, your inner gut feel, intuition, all of that, if you feel something very strongly, just go and ask somebody. See, people are willing to help. A lot of times we have inhibitions, we don't want to ask. So don't undermine the power of asking. You find the right contact through LinkedIn, through an email address, and you say, sir, please, here is I am hugely interested, can you allow me a 2-month internship in your organization? So I think that's the stepping stone. It's just that convincing somebody that you have that drive and hunger and fire.
And that's indeed very important, Vishalji. Ashmi, I would like to add on the similar thing that skilling up yourself every day, adding your, no, increasing your knowledge pool, whatever is a contextual now in these days. That is a very important core concept of marketing and in every area. We should try to skill ourselves daily. So when you go to bed in the night, try to close your eyes and think that what you have learned today. It may be some sort of behavioral aspects, it may be some other learning, but you should learn. Recall that what you have learned new today. That is the way of life we can have. Thank you, Vishalji. One of our guests, Mr. Sanjay, is asking a question with you. Is saying, sir, when you come across a new company which has a business model which, according to you and your market research, you came to conclusion that this business model, it has been tested in the past and has failed. How do you convince the client to, do you suggest whether you convince how will convince the client that this model is not suitable, or do you suggest your client or your company to change the business model? How you're going to handle the situation?
So it's a very, very, very good question. I will answer it as an agency because we constantly advise clients. So yes, so my first no-brainer answer is you need to work around the client, because see, end of the day, we are in the business. As I said, every business is a going concern. Business needs to make money. So I need to sell a project to a client. So what I would not do or what I would avoid is, yesterday I was having a discussion on somebody in Saudi. He wants to do an online logistics company. He wants to aggregate everything so people can book their logistics long haul services through that platform. Now, key is to first understand, even before the call, if he has given you a brief, to understand through certain incidents. In our cases, we tend to would have worked around that logistics, transportation, automotive. So I will have a lot of value add. Now, what a client buys, or what is your winning equation, is that connect. I'm now verge of closing a project today, this week, on automotive, and we will beat one of the biggest agencies who have a very big automotive team. And fundamentally, the client, he told me, there were two guys. They're currently based in India. They're advising, these are investment banking guys advising a client in the UK, right? And they told me, well, barring the price, all of that, he says, his remarks were that, Vishal, I think, and my colleague, he said, I think you have understood our our whole thing the best of all this. So he has spoken to 4 agencies. 4 agencies have given a quotation. And then, so I find winning a project and then hand holding the client is a process. You need to give that confidence, but at the same time, you need to deliver well. You need to deliver on time. You need to deliver on quality. And you have to be honest. One thing I have learned here is don't try to sell everything. We are not specialists. I cannot specialize. I was very upfront, if you recall, in my presentation, I said my interest area or love is B2B research and consulting. I do consumer research, but it is not my love area. But if I'm addressing to the client, I will say, here is my colleague. He specializes in consumer research, and we together will talk about this, right? So people in today's world like honesty. They like no bullshit, no nonsense. You have to be upfront. If you did a mistake, say I did a mistake. Let's rectify it, right? Nobody is perfect. Nobody is perfect in this world. All we are trying. So to answer your question, I think it's about I will tell him. I have in fact there were two incidents. In our business we call it go no go study, right? So you can do a market assessment. Yeah, a go no go study is we had a university from UK. Incidentally, both these stories are education related. One was 10, 12 years back, wherein a bunch of investors wanted to start an alternative medicine university here in UAE. Now, we found no viability of the business, and the simple logic for that was alternative medicine then that time was not recognized in this country, right? So where will you get your customer? Where will you get your teaching doctors, practicing doctors? So there is no. The client was very upset. He didn't he didn't pay our the final payment. He walked off. He was very upset. Understand, very natural, but he should have paid. He didn't, because we did actually, we did a favor to him by telling boss there is no market. You were to come and spend millions and millions of dollars, you're going to sink that money, right? The other incident was again a similar a study on saline market, wherein we were delivering the report the previous night. The client calls me on the night that day that, well, the government has pulled away the land from me. So I said, well, that's your problem, right? So you took as a risk as an entrepreneur. We've delivered a study, right? So you need to fulfill your promise. Anyway, long story short, I think the fundamental message I would leave here for you is be honest. If you think, but at the same time, we are in the business of selling also. So I would put it very politically right that let's do this study. In this study, we will suggest you, particularly in e-commerce, is very, very important. You need to come up with a uniqueness. See, if there is no, I tell the clients very simple that what will drive me or you to download the app? I said I hardly keep any app. So what is that USP which will drive me to download your app into my mobile? That is, we need to find that zing factor, right? So if that requires us to, deviate the business model, you have to do it, right? And my job is to give you that justification. You can ask me 100 questions. I need to have a logical answer. I need to substantiate it with data, but I will give you the logical answer. And if that answer is don't do this, I will say don't do this. So no nonsense. So I think
Thank you.
honesty pays in the long run. With the right political, you need to get paid as well.
Thank you, Vishalji. One of another colleague and our scholar, Latika ji, she's first of all giving you big thanks for an insightful session. Her question is a genuine question, what she's asking. Now, India has a challenge of actually of industry and economic data scarcity. We do not collect, we do not count it. That's the biggest problem. A question rises that how does one work around this challenge for say market estimation studies? If we don't have the data, if we are having scarcity of the data, how we are going to handle the situation?
Very good question. We face it in all the time. So good question. It's a good problem to have. See, any market study, I can tell you, has and I explain it to clients like this. Again, you're coming more from academic perspective. I understand that, but let me give you an industry perspective. See, there is a three elements of when we're doing any typical market study, feasibility, or a business plan. One is the government statistics. So typically, you are looking at what is being imported. Let's say it's a manufacturing thing, right? What is being imported and what is my local production. So I need to get that data, come what may. Now, there may be problems in that data because certain product categories are captured under a wrong HS code. Let's say that is the problem, right? So I have got a book or a CD from the government that this is my import data and this is my local production. So I park that data in one side. So, and I have absorbed that data. I feel 20% is wrong HS code. So I assessed it, I analyzed it, and I keep it on the side. Then I get into the what I call as the supply side, or what I also called as the competitor assessment, right? So let's assume we are doing a market feasibility. Then I will undertake primary research with these companies and businesses to understand. So when I interview people, let's say somebody gives me a statement like, well, I found I can tell you that these 4 companies control 80% of the market share in the market. Very important point. I will make a note of that. Then, since he's in the business, he will throw me another point. He will say, well, you know what? Uh, I think, and then you ask him a question. What do you think is the size of the market? He'll say, oh, it's $400 million, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, so you got that 400 number. You've got, he said, 4 companies control 80% of the market share. Then you go interview the second guy, third guy, fourth guy. You are picking nuances. Let's say you put this all in Excel. You can come up with a decent analysis. Third comes the what I call as the demand side. Now, demand is who is the buyer of this product, right? So can I do so to answer your question, when we do any market sizing exercise, there are 3 areas which you're trying to relate. You need to make them talk to each other and arrive at some kind of demand and supply mismatch, and this can all be run in Excel. So you've got 3 datas now. You've got the government statistics, you have got the supply side data, and you have got the demand side data. Now, fundamentally, all these 3 need to talk to each other. You need to find some link relation. So if you say the total market size is 400 million, your demand, right, should come more or less, either, there is more supply. So then you will find the rates have dropped, right? If the supply is more and your demand is less, your output rate will be low, correct? So based on these things, you would draw certain conclusions. So there is no right or wrong way. There are times I have, for example, this precast market, I have based my market sizing, the study which I shared with you, all on the supply side, because I was more confident on the people, the business heads I was meeting. I felt more confident that whatever number they said about market sizing was correct. The other way I could have done market sizing is I could have taken all the new construction projects which are happening in UAE, applied a factor of how much of percentage is precast in that, right? And arrived at, and then what would I have found is this supply side number has a correlation with the demand side number. You get my point? So I hope that answers the question. There are multiple, I said you need to come up with a methodology on each unique, because each situation is unique. No project will have the same dynamics, because the credibility of the data, the availability of the data varies.
Thank you, Vishalji. One of my old student, and he's working in the industry since last so many years. He is asking one question. So he's from industry. He's asking question. His name is Neil Sharma. Neil is asking question that how much how much would this current model will changes considering this COVID-19 impact? Is further continued question and asking that also any key change in the strategy that should be considered for a business moving towards a V-shaped recovery?
See, Neil, thanks for the question. I think my guess will be as good as your guess or anybody's guess. I think I was watching a very nice video on YouTube yesterday. I incidentally sent it to Professor Pandey. Maybe he can share it with you.
Yeah, I've seen, yeah.
Everybody is giving you an economic side of analysis. Industry is giving you, but I think the fact of the matter is, we have never, the history of this mankind has not seen anything of this scale. And I think what cannot be commented is we don't know how things will pan out. Now, certain industries, life has to go on. FMCGs will work. Technology, we are working. I'm still getting queries in our kind of business. If you look at, there was another, I heard somebody, they said the mankind, with the last tragedy, major tragedy of this related was in the 1930s. And so the gentleman says in the 1930s, overall, we were much more poorer. There were less infrastructure. So I think we are still better placed than what we were in 1930. I think humans have evolved. There is more wealth in overall in the world, right? We are better, but yes, India is a very different. You have micro SMEs. You have, the number he was sharing on. I don't recall the amount of people which are daily wage is huge, and thus I think somewhere it will impact across stratas of the society. It will impact businesses. Now, what will be the scale of impact? I think time will say. What I will be saying is mere speculation. It will be as good as your guess or anybody's guess. But I think the fact of the matter is nobody knows anything. What we need to keep doing is, keep doing our. I think the bigger message to you as students, as professor already said, is to the biggest learning I think for all of us here is to upgrade our skills, right? So whatever you are doing, think of what can I do today better. Read one book a week. I have a friend who reads one book a week. It's possible. If you can't do it in 2 weeks. So I think one is upgrade your skills. Second, if you're in business or job, obviously think of innovating, think of how you can make an X thing better, an X task better, how you can be more efficient. And I think the third, as a consumer, it applies to all of us, is I think we will all become more planned. We will all become more planned in a debt that we take, a housing loan that we take, any borrowing that we make. The whole argument of millennials will not, there was a big theory on that, millennials are spendthrift. You get your first job, you will buy a Nike shoe, you will finish your salary. I think now reality has hit all of us. So I think the culture of, see, Indian culture is very similar that way to Australians and Germans. Indians believe a lot in saving. Germans do the same, and that's why you would have heard very less of a huge slowdown in the German economy, which is obviously or an Australian economy. So I think that fundamental is going to come back, and I see that as a positive thing. Whenever we hit the recovery curve, I think we will all be, you will value relationships more. You will give more if you are giving less time to your parents because of your busyness of our lives. I think we have all become conscious, and I think these are big takeaways, which, let's not take things for granted. There is a lot in life, and I think we should come out with learnings from this. That is my overall message.
Vishalji, thank you. One of our student, Mitrajit Vishwas, is asking questions. Sir, how do you see the credibility of Indian market research companies like IMRB, no, which in India itself, vice versa, in compared to the market research companies, foreign market research companies like
Sure.
McKinsey, Forest, and do you feel that the Indian market research companies are now increasing their footprint in India itself for the research and consultancy, and how possibly even globally in the no time coming up?
See, what is happening in the big agency spaces, there are a lot of acquisitions happening. So, you know the Nielsen, TNS, Kantar, all these firms keep acquiring firms. So I think that acquisitions will continue. I think we will see in the current climate more acquisitions. I think you will see a lot of companies closing down also if your business model is not allowing you to grow or you're not getting new clients. I think at the same time there will be some small research companies which will go out of the business. So that is also happening for sure. There are firms, global firms, again talking of pure research, which have set up shop. One of the good ones in Gurgaon, for example, is called Dunhumby. Dunhumby is a very uh, Dunhumbby. It's a very high-end US firm, some very online data-driven analytics. And then I think we have seen a huge spurt of growth in market analytics, AI and this, the technology driven companies. So I think, see, what happened earlier on is from the research space, you had a silo which broke off. It was called the KPO industry, knowledge process outsourcing. These were more backend. Now what is happening is part of the, because the traditional research agencies did not innovate. Okay, there is a new area which has sprung up as a separate entity in itself. These are called data science companies, right? Now they come with a complete different DNA. So in a way, in my view, the industry has kind of split into these different pockets, these different specialized pockets, right? So I think as we speak, a Nielsen Ipsos TNS would be looking at acquiring, either acquiring these companies or acquiring that skill set, starting newer verticals. So I think it's the name of the game is all innovation. All these companies would have to innovate. Everyone has to go in the direction, in a direction where the market is going, what the market need is. And then comes the element of, like, we specialize in a very, very niche area. So I think there will be space for niche agencies who are trying to solve a very niche problem. Now we are more, for example, we position ourselves more on the as a market entry consultancy. So we help a client who is coming into the country with a feasibility, business plan, business setup, all of that, right? So the equivalent for us in India, in Gurgaon, is a company called Technova Global. Technova does this end to end. There's another German guy who runs out of Udyog Vihar. It's called Meyer and Vidorno, Meyer and Vidorno India Private Limited. So they call themselves an India entry consultancy. So I think there are different value propositions different companies have identified. These companies, what they say is, boss, eventually what do you need? You need to grow your market share. So he wants to bring a German company which wants to sell in India. Now it may need market research, it may not need market research, but what it definitely needs is it wants to sell its products in India, right? As long as the pricing works. So Meyer and Vidorno has that as a business model. So I think you will see niche agencies remaining. You will see some will vanish out. You will see bigger agencies buying smaller agencies. You will see Nielsen TNS getting into data science. You will see data science emerging as a separate business. So I think there is a lot happening out there, not only in this industry, in every industry.
Thank you, Vishalji. One of our another student, Mr. Waipu Cheng, who is working on art industry and its marketing, India and China together. So Waifu is asking question that last year he visited Dubai and participated in international art event. Despite the slump in the international art market, Dubai, which is known for oil and has backed the train in the art field and has gone through the prosperous era in 2019 in terms of art, with a huge increase of more than 30% year on year. Relatively speaking, the prospects for Indian arts market are good, but the development is slow. What is the main reason for this difference in the development?
See, I think art is. I'm assuming art. You're talking of selling art. So you are procuring art from a whatever artists all across the
Yeah,
country, and then you're creating a platform, right?
yeah,
I think it's a great business. I think as a buyer, I think some of the things which you need to answer as a business is, if you're selling anything online, is, see, today Amazon has a problem because I know people who bought a shoe. You bought a Nike shoe, and then when the shoe was delivered, you realized that you felt that the shoe is fake, right? So I think the biggest problem today of anything online is that what is the checks and balances, what is the credibility associated that whatever we are selling is credible, right? So I've worked on a few business plans which are online. I've done a diamond jewelry business somebody wanted to do here online. And in fact, we studied two companies in India which are doing diamond jewelry online. So the bigger thing, I think, which you need to answer, or any business owner needs to answer, is that what is that level of confidence that you will give to the end consumer? Because if you're putting a picture of that art form to sell, and I'm seeing that picture now, that picture could be a great professionally taken picture, but when I purchase that and the art is delivered, I may argue with the company that this is not what I bought.
This is not what I bought for whatever I paid for. This is inferior in quality, etc. So I think one of the things any business in this space needs to think is, how do you create that credibility? How do you create that trust, right? So I think that is a major important factor. If there is a way you can overcome that, and I'll give you an example. There's a very successful company here online. It's called Luxury Closet. What Luxury Closet does is, it basically transacts in second-hand luxury bags. Okay, so let's say I have a Louis Vuitton bag. I am bored with it. I have used it for 2 years. I am bored with the bag. I have the original receipt. The bag is original. I will ship it to them. Okay, with all the originals. They have a guy who can make out whether it's an original bag or a fake bag. Okay, they will check, and then they will speak to you. They will ask you for a minimum cutoff price, which you will agree with them, and then he puts it on his website. So fundamentally, he, in the whole process, he is doing due diligence on behalf of the buyer, that the bag that he is selling on his platform is an original bag. Because even once, if he doesn't do that or he gets it wrong and he sells that second hand bag to me, and I go back to him saying that, well, this bag is fake, he loses his credibility immediately. You understand? So I think in case of art, what is important is, what is the delivery mechanism? Because if I own a very very expensive piece of art, why will I ship it to you for you to evaluate, right? So I think what needs to be thought is, in the high end, high value antique art space, what I would do is to study, is there any business model somebody has implemented in US, Europe, which I can draw certain learnings from. Because I think here it's all about trust, the seller trusting the partner in between, and then you as a integrator, a marketplace in between. How do you trust what I am selling as a seller is not fake, and for a buyer who is buying this product, he is not getting a fake product. So I think art, these are the things you need to think about, how that mechanism will work.
Thank you, Vishalji. Another of our uh, guest, and he's industry is in the industry, from the industry band, is asking a relevant question. First of all, he's giving you thank you for giving this amazing client related stories. His name is Sahil Raj. Sahil Raj is asking this question, that I have a question, that how much marketing research companies and industries as whole is accelerating technology adaptation due to COVID-19, since traditional marketing research is greatly disturbed, specifically from the angle of the data collection, correctness, methodology, analysis. Is there any enablers in terms of this products, technology industry is moving towards, like automation or ML based data correction, anomalies detection, etc.?
No, of course, there's a huge, we've just started face-to-face research. So I know of agencies which, there is one agency from the UK called YouGov, YOUGOV. Okay, YouGov has become a pure online agency. They say we only do online work. Now that to me is a business model. That is a strategy. That YouGov says, I only want to do online research. I don't want to do anything else. So I think, to answer your question, there are agencies. This is, to me, boils down on the strategy. Now, the kind of work that we do in our business is very much B2B, and B2B, I cannot do face things online. So generally, I think market has moved in a lot into online, and we will only see it going up.
Thank you, Shalji. Uh, there are a lot of questions which we are getting, but again, we are running short. We have the time. One guest, Pradeep ji, is asking that if you can provide any link for getting e-certificate. So he would like to have the link through which he can access and he can go for some e-certificate. But
See, the best one is, if you can Google. See, there will be a lot of it from US, etc. But you're looking for a pure market research certifications / qualification. You can look at, there are 4 or 5 layers of certification. In the UK, there is something called as Market Research Society. So you could start with their very basic certification in market research, because I think their content is quite good. Having said that, I don't know what kind of content is available in upgrade, or if there are free options. If you have free options, go for that initially till you think, okay, this is an area of interest to me. Then you can move into a more paid kind of thing. I think there is a lot of literature which will be available as even as free literature around. So I would say use that, and if the interest is further, then you can go with the Market Research Society's certifications.
So thank you, Vishalji, for an insightful session, and it was great hearing from you. And from a practitioner point of view, you have highlighted the key aspects which needs to be keep in our mind. And thank you all guests and students and faculty members for this engaging discussion. It was quite insightful. It was a great learning even for me. And I'm thanking you all on the behalf of Office of Doctoral Studies. Thank you. We'll meet again on the same platform with the new guest, with new ideas. Thank you, Vishalji. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I'll request all participants, please leave the session one by one so that I leave in last.